This is the Small Farm team's custom-built compost spreader, available for you to check out from the Small Farm's tool library. The spreader has a 3-ton capacity, a 20-ton axle with super single tires that hold up bouncing through the field, hydraulic drag chain, spinners that cover a 14-foot swath, and various safety features.
It takes a 90 horsepower tractor to pull these spreaders because you got to have good hydraulic PTO to get everything turning to make an even spread. It takes 540 PTO RPMs to spread with.
Compost is the main thing it was built for, but you can spread gypsum or lime. You just have to watch how much you put in the box when you're trying to spread. Don't put in wood chips, because the drag chain can't effectively move them out. Same problem with super wet compost. Spread it out to dry for a day before loading it. Watch out for rocks or chunks of metal in compost that can tear out the drag chain. Watch out for string or wire, because it can wrap around the bottom of the spinner blades and act like a brake. These impurities are more common in manure, which is not permitted in the spreader. Safety comes first.
Always shut your PTO off when you get off, before you get off, and put the tractor in park, brakes on, put it neutral. Ideally, you should shut your tractor off when you climb off.
You must remove the safety guard around the PTO for the hydraulic pump to fit. Remove the 4 bolts, remove the guard, and replace the bolts for safekeeping. Make sure the PTO jack shaft has the wide grooves facing out to achieve the correct RPM of 540.
This is the hitch that we use. It goes into a receiver on the pickup. You put the pin in, you put your safety latch on.
A tractor has the correct pin hitch. Use the jack to adjust the drawbar and match the height of the hitch. Back the vehicle into position and insert the pin. Insert the safety clip in the pin to keep it from bouncing out. If you will be spreading for more than one day, a lock is recommended instead of a pin. Attach the safety chain to the tractor body to spare the hydraulic line if the hitch fails. If hitching to a pickup, wrap the chain around the bumper. Raise the jack and stow it on top of the drawbar. To hook up the pump, first remove the adjustment arm of the 3-point, then thread the pump onto the PTO with the pump arm pointing where the adjustment arm was. Attach the pump arm chain to the pin from the adjustment arm to keep the pump from spinning and twisting the hydraulic lines. Alternatively, chain the pump arm to the tractor body. If you need to move the hoses out of the way, you can very slightly loosen the nuts on the pump, move the hoses, and retighten. One of the nuts is 1.5 inch and the other is 1 1/4. The light plug connects directly to the tractor. For connecting it to a pickup, you must use an adapter. This transmits the turn signal and brake light controls to the tail lights. If transporting on the road using a tractor, the hazard lights should be flashing. Also, the slow-moving vehicle symbol must be visible when transporting on the road behind a tractor.
But when it's on a pickup, they don't want to see the slow-moving sign behind a pickup, so you put it up there and you have a chain to lock it.
The spreader must be empty for towing. The spreader has no suspension and no brakes, so do not exceed 45 miles per hour on the road. There are also no fenders, so in the unlikely event of using it in a muddy field, run it up and down the field road to get the mud off before transporting it on pavement. Walk around the spreader before running it. The drag chain will stretch with use. If it's sagging, tighten it by adjusting the front axle. There's an adjustment bolt on each side. Tightening these will move the axle forward. Ensure that both sides are adjusted the same by measuring the gap between the adjustable bearing and the anchor point on each side. Make sure the shutoff valve on the hydraulic tank is open during operation. It should only be shut off during repair of a hydraulic line or if a hydraulic line is losing fluid. The temperature gauge on the hydraulic fluid tank also indicates the fill level. If the level is at the bottom of the gauge, it's a good idea to add about 5 gallons of fluid. This is unlikely, though, unless there's a leak. The exception is on super hot days, when the level will rise naturally as it heats up. Check the hydraulic lines every day for wear. If they're rubbing on something, particularly metal, find a way to secure them out of the way. The oil level in the wheel oil bearing should be between the add line and the full line. If it's low, add some 90 weight oil, but do not overfill. Also, keep your eye open for loose nuts and bolts and for leaks. If you can see bare, unpainted metal where the axle attaches, that means the axle is loose. However, this is unlikely. Before you load the spreader, turn it on from the tractor and make sure everything turns.
So when you first start the machine loaded, it's good to run the throttle up so you got some hydraulic fluid going through the lines, and then all you have to do is however you turn on your hydraulics on your tractor, pull the button up or hit the toggle switch, and it'll start turning.
The safety door, where the hazard sign is useful for keeping material from falling out during loading. You'll need to use a second tractor to load the spreader in order to keep it attached to the first tractor. Only fill to where you can just barely see the compost over the rim. The spreader must never be unhooked from the tractor when it has compost in it. If it's not hitched, an imbalance could cause the front end to fly up into the air. When you first get the spreader into the field with a load of material, the drag chain will have to run for a moment before the material hits the spinners.
I mean, you'll see a little bit of material, then all of a sudden you'll see a big burst. And that's when you're ready to, and you better be going.
The pipe around the spinners will keep people from walking into them.
Never stand behind the machine when it's, or have anybody stand behind the machine when it's operating, because you've got flying objects coming out the back and to the side. Don't put your hands in the chain as it's turning here or down in where the gearbox is.
Be mindful while spreading.
You have motors under here, and if this wheel goes into a ditch or you go over a hill, you got to watch you don't drag these motors and rip them off.
Make sure you can always see that cloud that indicates the spinners are spinning. If you see the hydraulic fluid level and the temperature gauge drop, you may have broken a hose. If the level climbs to the top of the gauge, it's overheating, possibly due to string caught in the spinners. The 1.5-inch wrench for adjusting the back door is hanging by the hydraulic fluid tank. Press the spring-loaded clasp and turn it to release the wrench. Remember to close the clasp when you put the wrench back. Crank the gate all the way open unless you plan to run very low tonnage at the back. It partly depends on the density of the material. Adjust the motor valve to the interval between 4 and 5 for a higher application rate, say 3 tons or above, or the interval between 3 and 4 for lower, like 2 tons of compost or 1 ton of gypsum. The settings are discrete in spite of the continuous scale on the control. Unscrew the knob to release the arm, move the arm to the desired setting, and secure it by tightening the knob. Run the spinners between 6 and 10 depending on how wide you want to spread the compost. 10 will throw the compost 14 feet. Check the forecast to make sure it's not too windy or you'll lose valuable compost. 6 is good for a narrow band, but the spinners must always be in motion, even when weighed down by compost, or the fluid will heat up. The spinners and the drag chain motor are competing for hydraulic fluid, so the settings are not absolute. There's no formula for how fast to run the tractor.
1 ton, you could probably get it up to around 6 miles an hour. I know 3 ton, it's roughly 4 to 4.5 miles per hour with the tractor. And then it's less as you keep wanting more tonnage out.
It depends on the material's density. If you want higher tonnage than that, run multiple passes. After you've spread a couple of loads, estimate the proportion of the compost supply that you've taken and the amount of the field you've covered. If the supply is going down too fast, you can either run the tractor faster, set the drag chain motor below 4, or adjust the back door lower. If the piles are going down slower than expected, you can always make more passes. But if it goes down too fast, you could run out before you finish the field.
When you get down to half a field, I do it again. When we get down to 3/4 of the field, you do it again to see how much in the pile versus how much field you have left.
String will wrap around the base of the spinners where they meet the shaft. If you can't pull the string out, you can loosen the 4 bolts in the spinner and lift it off. If you overfill, the weight may stop the chain, causing pressure buildup. In case of pressure buildup, the relief valve will shunt the fluid back to the tank to save the lines and pump, and the motors will stop. You'll have to remove some material before proceeding. A fluid blockage will also trigger the relief valve. At least once a day, add grease to the grease zerks, also known as grease fittings, until grease is visible on the bearings. There are 5 grease zerks under the shield of the chain reduction drive, 1 grease zerk on the left end of the rear drag chain axle, and 1 on each end of the front drag chain axle. At the end of the day, empty out the material. Any dew will make the material stick together and not flow. For overnight storage, we recommend a secured yard. When you finish spreading, unchain and remove the pump. You may need to pry it off with a pinch bar. Stow it on the rod, unchain and unhitch the spreader, jack it up slightly, and drive the tractor away. Remember to replace the safety guard. Hose off the spreader tires and undercarriage to prevent the spread of weed seeds and pathogens. Please refer back to this video or to the handout as needed. Happy spreading!